The story is begin from here when Leah Hildebrand explained about the history that the Kromer family in Germany was well known for having war heroes through the generations. Their monstrous power ended up becoming a legend that everyone admired. 6 other families that have received a peerage title for aiding the Kromers and helping achieve a win in the war decided that the Kromers should become the leaders and govern the country. Amongst them, the Hildebrand family, who had the highest number of strong female knights, was called Valkyrie in Germany and was highly respected. For the past decades, the Kromers have participated in various wars such as the religious war and the conflict with the Pruss. The last Kromer leader died after being ill for a long time because of the Pruss curse, and the eldest of the 3 sons almost got murdered by acid thrown by a nanny who was hired by them. The Pruss tried to harm the Kromers in many different ways ever since the leader's prediction that the Pruss would be destroyed by the Kromers came about. However, their actions boosted the fighting spirit of the older son, who had lost one eye and half of his face, so much that he, himself, brought his army to their base in Poland and slaughtered them. When Roxanne Kromer, the unfortunate eldest son, came back to Germany from Poland after the religious war, there was no one in the entire country that hadn't heard about his merciless and ferocious personality. Leah Hildebrand became very happy and said, "It's so nice out today. It's getting warm now." She thought Leah Hildebrand, she is near the shore, and said, "This place always lifts my mood." She's strange and thought, even though I have to get permission from the Kromer family to set foot on their property. Leah Hildebrand smiles and thought they probably wouldn't kick out a lord's daughter from their land right away, right? She told about her reason behind trespassing for the past 20 years. Leah Hildebrand fell on the grass ground and laughed, and thought honestly, I haven't seen a single person except for that kid for the past 20 years. At least I should enjoy the view. She looking at the lake and said the weather was this nice on that day as well. She looking at the lake and thought, when I was young, I met a kid about my age who was silently crying at this lake. Leah Hildebrand taking a leaf in her hand and surprised thought her dark and deep eyes that were filled with tears shined brightly like the lake in front of us. Leah Hildebrand looked at her and asked, "Why are you crying?" She thought when she heard me, her eyes got bigger. She started weeping and thought, and diamond-like tears fell down her cheeks one by one. She said, "My mother passed away all of a sudden." Her tears fell down, and said, "I didn't even get to say good night to her that night before it happened." Leah Hildebrand looked at her, and thought it was something I used to do daily, but I wasn't able to that night. She said, "I regret that often and I miss her so much on hard days like this." She thought her face was so sad and beautiful. Leah Hildebrand hugged her, and thought that even my young heart wanted to make her happy. "Don't cry." Leah Hildebrand smiles and happily asked, "Do you want to go look at a beetle house? Do you like beetles?" She replied, "Yes, I do." Leah Hildebrand thought ever since that day, we met up at the lake and hung out a lot. They both stood and went on. She smiles and said her laugh made me happy. Leah Hildebrand taking something and thought after 2 seasons, when fall began, she suddenly stopped showing up. I was thinking about giving her the acorns I collected as a gift, but she didn't show up at all for the entire next year. I realized this once I started feeling bad. Leah Hildebrand thought that I should have asked for her name. I didn't even know her name. She thought while she looked at the lake that short memory, it's already been more than 20 years, still brings me back to this lake even today. Leah Hildebrand slightly smiled and thought, I think about that kid on bad days. I hope she is happy wherever she is. Hopefully, nothing makes her cry wherever she goes. She closed her eyes and thought, I hope she's happy. She looked at her and said, happy. Leah Hildebrand shocked and looked at her and thought, so, I mean, this story is about a very small event that happened between the Kromer family, who are surrounded by rumors, and the soft yet strong Hildebrand family. Leah Hildebrand looking the sky, and she thought that Leah Hildebrand is the oldest daughter in the Hildebrand family. She has caught people's attention with her beauty since the day she was born. Furthermore, she was always taller than other kids her age, and she was famous for being as strong as an adult man by the age of 10. She participated in various wars as a knight when she was a teenager, and her army never lost. It was around that time when she put down her armor. Her mother had been sick for years, ever since giving birth to her youngest son, and she ended up passing away the day before Leah arrived back from the war. After her mother passed away, Leah decided to spend more time with her family. so she stopped participating in wars altogether and began to live the life of any ordinary woman during that time. And this is that Leah Hildebrandt. Leah Hildebrandt shouted and said that legendary Leah is currently dealing with a man. Leah Hildebrandt shocked and looked at him and thought, I've seen many naked male bodies during different wars, but this is my first time seeing one right in front of me. She also thought, what am I supposed to do as a lady? Turn away? Yell? Or both? But why is he not moving at all? Oh, his scar. Leah Hildebrandt looked at him and shouted, saying, It's so big. She said, You've been staring for quite a long time. Leah Hildebrandt shouted and thought that right. I'm a lady. What am I supposed to do again? She said, A pervert. The scream of a lady. Who are you talking about? Leah Hildebrandt thought, Miss Leah, where have you been all this time? The Hildebrandts manor. Leah Hildebrandt laughed and said, I went for a walk. It's a bit hot out today. The servant said, Lady, have you been running in a forest or something? Look at all these leaves. Leah Hildebrandt, going and saying, Helena, please stop nagging. She fell on the sofa and said, Ugh, it's been a crazy morning. The servants replied, Miss Leah. Please. Leah Hildebrandt sat on the sofa, and the servants looked at her. The servant said, I wish she would be like that all the time. The servants said, You are good at sewing and cooking. Leah Hildebrandt smiled and thought it's much easier than taking care of armor and cooking wild animals after hunting. Leah Hildebrandt looked to the other side and said, But I couldn't do this for very long. The servant, who has a one-eye glasses, said, Lady, she's smart, talented, and beautiful. The servant turned and shouted, How is she not married yet? She hasn't even been dating. She's at the end of her 20s. Leah Hildebrandt laughed and said, It doesn't matter, my youngest brother, Rihit, can be the heir. He said, A memory. Leah Hildebrandt replied, I didn't like any of the guys I've met so far. He shouted and said, I didn't expect you to be this tall. She looked at him angrily and said, I'm kind of tall. 5 feet 9 inches, 6 feet 1 inch. He said, I'm also strong. The servant turned and said also, They will eventually find out that I've been pretending to be a quiet lady in a few days. Still, Leah Hildebrandt shouted and thought, You are not planning on living alone forever, are you? Leah Hildebrandt sat on the sofa, smiled, and said, What's wrong with living alone? I have you, Helena. Helena shouted and said, You are always like this. Leah Hildebrandt said, Well, Helena thought, I think I will be lonely when my siblings leave the house after getting married. I feel lonely right now because they are both away. Helena said, Ma'am. Leah Hildebrandt smiled and said, I'm not expecting to find a spouse, but I feel like it'd be nice to have a lifelong friend. She thought, although you always somehow make it about guys. Helena looked and said, Miss. Helena hugged her and said loudly, As long as you are okay with it, I can be your lifelong friend. Leah Hildebrandt thought, She won't nag as much today. The servant, taking a letter, said, Ma'am, Marina, a letter has arrived. Marina asked, A letter? The servant said, It's from the Cromers. Marina said, Helena asked, What is it about? Ever since the head of the family passed away last winter, we haven't received a letter from them. Marina said, True. Marina thought that last winter, the head of the Cromer family passed away after fighting an illness for some time, and the second son, Brilwant, became the new head of the family. I attended the funeral on behalf of my family, in the stead of my father, who was sick at the time. She thought when all the people were gathered, the funeral was busy with people from 6 subordinate families who all hoped to be noticed by Brilwant, who had just become head. Marina thought that it's so crowded. I saw the Cromer brothers from afar. She thought for the first time that day. The second son, Brilwant Cromer, was more beautiful than any woman. The eldest son, Roxanne Cromer, was a tyrant. The youngest son, Hound Cromer, has a different mother and has yet to return from Poland. Huh? Roxanne Cromer said Scar. Marina thought, Wait a minute. Helena shouted and thought, What's wrong, ma'am? Marina, while reading the letter, said, Oh, they are holding a party to celebrate the new head of the family and to meet with the heads of the subordinate families. Marina thought, I only saw him from afar. But perhaps. The servants laughed and thought, Perhaps. Is he that bear? Helena shouted and said to other servants, Quick, quick! Bring that dress too! Yeah, that too! Hurry! Helena took a bundle of dresses and said, "She didn't seem too excited about the party. Don't you think you are getting ahead of yourself, Helena?" Another servant replied, "Last time, she met a guy at a party, and they became friends." Helena turned, shouting, "That's the problem. Who in the world doesn't even have a boyfriend when they have such a pretty face?" The other servant looked and said, "Miss Leah. She's a living example. Although, it's a rare case." Helena, surprised, asked, "Why are you trying so hard these days when she doesn't even want to get married?" A servant thought, "Mr. Rihet is still missing." While Helena was walking and two other servants followed, one of them asked, "What's wrong with that?" A servant thought, "Since the Cromer family has a new head, people are gonna want to decide on a head for the Hildebrandt family for whom Miss Leah is temporarily filling in, and the law that only a married female can become the head of a family is going to be an issue." Helena asked, "What can we do about it?" "That's the law in this country. She's fortunate to even be able to temporarily fill the position." Helena held some dresses while the other servants also carried dresses. She said to them, "It's still a problem even if Mr. Rihet returns home safely. Being the head of a family would be too much for a 16-year-old boy. And if we don't do anything about it, Mr. Conrad, who is Miss Leah's uncle, is going to take all of the Hildebrandt's property." Helena also added, "That cannot happen. Our master and madam worked so hard for it. So, she needs to at least find a lover or fiancé right now," Helena said. "Also, today, there's gonna be a perfect match for Miss Leah there." Helena shouted happily, "A beautiful single man! Brilwant Cromer! What do you think? The most beautiful couple in the world." Helena became very aggressive and shouted, "Don't you want to see? The wedding of the most beautiful couple? Even better, he is the head of the Cromer family. No one will be able to complain." Another servant said, "Calm down, Helena." Helena replied, "I will complete this mission." A servant asked, "All three Cromer brothers are single. The eldest one, Roxanne Cromer. He's also single, isn't he?" Helena replied, "Not him." She was asked, "Why?" Marina thought, "The tyrant, Roxanne Cromer. Have you not heard the rumor about him? He is the devil incarnate. When he was the temporary head, he was disengaged 6 times. That speaks for his personality. I can't allow Miss Leah to marry someone like that, no matter how desperate she is." The servants thought, "Helena's imagination, that's nothing like her." Helena loudly said, "I'm sure that he was born with all the bad personality traits that Brilwant was supposed to have as a human." Another servant said, "Helena, that's rough." Helena pointed her finger and loudly said, "Anyways, you guys help." The servants replied, "All right. Okay." While the servants were getting her lady ready, one said, "Ma'am, can you please show your beautiful face now? I understand that you don't want to go to a crowded place." Marina replied, "That's not the reason why. I mean, it is true that I don't want to go, but—" The servant shouted, "What do I do? That bear was Roxanne Cromer." Helena said, "Make her beautiful." Marina looked at the dresses, shouted, and thought, "No, no way. There's no way that someone with a significant role in the family like him would be there during the day. Or was it really even him? I hope it wasn't." When Marina hid her face, she said, "I'll see you guys later then." The servants said, "Ma'am." Face. After removing the cloth from her face, she looked pretty and said, "Same person." Helena shouted and picked her up, saying, "Ma'am, you must befriend Mr. Brilwant, do you understand?" Marina said, "That's why I'm going." Helena picked her from her dress and said, "You guys must get very close. All right?" Marina looked at her angrily and said, "All right?" The servants looked her way and thought, "I hope she does okay." She became ready, and a servant said, "Hello, Miss Leah Hildebrandt." Miss Leah said, "I want to go back home already." Leah sighed and thought, "I know why Helena is so anxious. I wouldn't have to do this if Rihet would return at least." Mr. Rihet smiled and thought, "My angel-like youngest brother Rihet left our house last year around this time." She read the letter he wrote. "I will come back as a strong man who can help the family." Father laughed and said, "This boy, is all grown up. Father, she thought, you and Noah have been too protective of him because he is weak. I understand him. Don't worry. This is not gonna be a problem when I get better soon. However, they stopped hearing from Rihit, and he was still missing, never finding out about their father's passing last winter. Leah thought. After many attempts, I found out that he had joined the military, but I couldn't find out which troop he was in. I don't even know if he's alive. Leah walked and thought. No, there's no way my brother is dead. Angels don't die. Do they? She said. Anyways. They gathered, and while they looked, Leah thought, my job is to take on the role of head of the family until Rihit returns. Leah Hildebrand has arrived. When Miss Leah arrived, all the people glanced at her. Marina asked. Miss Leah, how are you? He said. Miss Leah. She also smiled while drinking and said, Wow, it's Miss Leah. Miss Leah smiled and said, Hello? It's been a while. All the people gathered around Leah and said, Miss Leah. Nice to see you. She's as beautiful as I've heard. Miss Leah still smiled. When all gathered, they said, We are glad to see you, even though we know that you are only here as the head of the family. She said, Just until Rihit returns. They asked, Right, is he still traveling? She said, Right. Miss Leah thought, We saw Noah a bit ago. Did you guys come here separately? Miss Leah said, Noah is still in Poland. Miss Leah thought. The knights who went to Poland have all returned. I heard that everyone was invited to this party regardless of their rank. Noah said to her, I'm sure that you are happy to have one of your siblings back home. Miss Leah smiled and said, Is that right? She thought. Noah, that bitch. That means that she's been partying around instead of coming home. She shouted and thought, Noah, this girl. Does she have any idea what's been going on in our family? Where has she been? Noah thought, where? All the people gathered, and Noah thought, where are you? Leah Hildebrand thought, Noah Hildebrand. I will kick you. Inner thoughts. Servants thought, doesn't Miss Leah look scary today? As he arrived, all the people glanced and said, Mr. Brilwant. Brilwant smiled and said, You are all here. Thank you for making time. Brilwant Cromer, the head of the Cromer family. People looked at him, and he thought, HNN, Mr. Brilwant. Brilwant smiled and said, This party may not look the best. I should have met with every one of you separately. Brilwant said to all the people, but I had a lot of work to do since I suddenly became the head of the family after my father passed away. Please understand. Leah Hildebrand turned and thought, Noah, they thought, as you all know, our Cromer family has gone through a change. I appreciate the 6 families that stayed unified and cooperative even through hard times. He thought Muller, Boateng. They also thought Stegen, Henkel, Crux. Brilwant said to them, and Hildebrand, did no one come from their family? Servants said, I heard that someone did. Brilwant laughed and said, You were over there, Miss Leah. Miss Leah also smiled and thought, It's too bright. Suddenly, double hit, reality, nope. Noah said to him. Mr. Brilwant turned and looked at him. Brilwant smiled and said, The Cromer family will try our best to maintain peace between all 6 families. Let's have fun today without worrying about anything. Miss Leah, angry and thought when no one was watching. Noah thought, Oh, I almost forgot. This is Max, from the Henkel family, who has been assisting me ever since I was young and will continue to do so. Miss Leah thought, Where is this girl? Is she not in the hall? Also, I am still learning about the military and the tactics they use. So for a while, Leah looked and said, Oh, my bad. Brilwant smiled and thought, I will be getting help from my older brother, who's been acting as the head of the family for quite some time. Miss Leah looked at Roxanne Cromer, shocked, and he thought, Everyone, say hello to my older brother, Roxanne, who has returned from the war. Miss Leah shouted at him and said, Ah. You are that Per. Miss Leah thought, Per, is this déjà vu? They all looked at them. She picked his coat and said, A purple bug. Miss Leah said that, it's not here anymore. She bent and said to him, Forgive me, Sir Roxanne. Brilwant, and all others were shocked and looked. Roxanne Cromer shouted, looked, and thought, He looks even worse than before. Miss Leah looked with surprised eyes and thought, Why though? I'm apologizing to him, it wasn't on purpose. Neither was what happened in the morning, I was too focused on looking for Noah. Roxanne Cromer said to her. Roxanne Cromer? I've been away for a while. She thought, what was that? Roxanne Cromer said to them, from now on, with my brother, as our duty, my family, Miss Leah shouted and also thought, it's not like he ignored my apology. He cannot. It's totally fine, but he is known for being quiet. For some reason, it feels so bad. Is it because of his face? People whispered, and one of them said to Brilwant, I'm sure she was scared. Another replied, she still is a lady inside. Miss Leah thought, this is all because of Noah, that bitch. Brilwant said, heh? Brilwant takes 2 glasses and said, can I sit next to you, Miss Leah? Leah Hildebrandt looked and said, oh, was trying to calm down. Miss Leah was sitting on the sofa and took the glass from Brilwant. Sure, Mr. Brilwant. She thought, you are not enjoying yourself at all. Leah smiled and said, no, I am. Brilwant said, if it's because of my brother. Miss Leah laughed and said, oh, not at all. That's half correct. Leah smiled and said, actually, I heard that my sister Noah is here at the party, but I can't find her. I heard that she arrived back in the country from someone else. Brilwant looked at her and asked, is that right? They gathered, and Brilwant pointed his finger toward them and said, Max. As Noah reached, Brilwant looked at him and asked, wasn't Miss Noah here somewhere? Where did she go? Noah, surprised, said, I'm not sure, I will go look for her right now. Please. Miss Leah has been looking for her. He glanced and thought, Mr. Brilwant. Leah smiled and thought, a business smile. Thank you so much. Brilwant, also glad, said, no problem. It's my pleasure. Miss Leah and Brilwant were sitting together on the same sofa. All people whispered and thought, they look close. They look very good together, don't they? Miss Leah thought, they are both single, aren't they? He is even prettier close up. He, kind of. Leah Hildebrandt became sad and thought, I feel like he kind of looks like that kid. He could have been one of her cousins. By the way, did you already know my brother? She asked, huh? Who? Brilwant looked at her and asked, you. She was shocked and said, who? Brilwant, angry, said to her, my older brother. Leah Hildebrandt shouted and said, absolutely not. We don't know each other at all. It's my first time seeing him today. This is my second time seeing him today. But, it is the first time ever. Brilwant said to her, really? That's strange, Brilwant said to her. He was very startled. She asked, when? Brilwant said to her, when he bumped into you. That's a startled face? He mostly looks angry and cold, but he looked slightly different there. She thought, I think it's only me so far in this world who can distinguish that. Leah said to him, I'm relieved that wasn't his angry face. He replied to her, oh, that face is. He asked her, Is it too early? Brilwant laughed and said to her, I'll tell you later. He isn't angry, so trust me. She, strange, looked at him and said, all right. Brilwant looked at her and said, if you can. Leah asked if I can. He thought, how about we have a luncheon all together next time? Leah Hildebrandt said and thought, that sounds nice. Even better if you'd like to visit my place. This is fast. Mr. Brilwant is quite straightforward. He asked, really? She thought, Helena will be happy. They sat together, and she said to him while she was glad, we have a great cherry tart. Do you like desserts? Brilwant replied, of course. People became happy and said, I see the chemistry. They are both old enough to be married by now. Noah said to him, Mr. Brilwant, just a moment. Brilwant laughed and said, thank you for the invite, my brother will be happy too, just a moment. Leah Hildebrandt became very angry and thought, you meant that he'll be coming too, with that brother? Together? She also shouted and thought, I don't think I will be able to even eat the food with you two, for various reasons. Leah said, Roxanne eating a cherry tart? Gives up. They both looked at her and shouted and thought, huh? Why are they looking at me like that? Brilwant, near her, said, Miss Leah, we found Miss Noah, but, Noah said, oh, wait. Noah shouted, grabbed her arm, and said, lady. You can't go that way. She thought and said, I heard that my younger sister is Miss Leah. Leah shouted and said, doing some nonsense, in someone else's house. Why don't you let me go? Noah said to her. Leah? Leah Hildebrandt? Miss Leah, this is Schultz Muller. He was in the nightage with Noah. Miss Leah, calm down first. Yes, it's Leah. Noah also looked at her and said, I am sorry to introduce myself like this. Leah Hildebrandt became very angry and said, but I will bring back Noah, no, Miss Noah in a little bit. Also, Mr. Roxan's room is here too, so they all are surprised, and she thought, what's going on? Looks like Miss Leah is upset. Brilwant thought, what's happening? Noah and Brilwant tried to catch her, and Noah shouted and said, Miss Leah. 2 grown-up men are getting dragged by her. She thought, Noah, she said, you have no idea how long I've been waiting for you. Noah, I really like you, he said to her, Noah Hildebrandt, the second Hildebrandt daughter. Vivian, we can't do this here. Also, she said, don't be like that right now. Roxanne Cromer was standing in his office in front of the table. He sat on the chair and thought. He looked at her and shouted, Leah, why are you here? What is going on in Leyhausen? She said, Leah? Wait. Leah! Wait. Leah said to him, let's talk first. Noah shouted and said, I didn't know you were coming. Schultz! Max! Help! He said, no, save me, Miss Leah. Marina shouted and said, why are you here instead of our father? I was really planning on heading home tomorrow. Leah said to her, I haven't received any replies. Haven't you gotten any of my letters? He was shocked and looked and said, letters? You sent me letters? Leah turned, glanced, and said to him, let's head home first. What's going on? Brilwant said, Roxanne. Leah said to her, let's talk at home, Noah. Noah said, but Leah, what about the party? Okay, I'll go home. Leah said to him, I apologize for causing a scene. The Hildebrandts are going to leave now. Leah also felt ashamed and said, I hope you enjoy the rest of your night. Brilwant said to her, Miss Leah. Leah glanced and thought, I'll be waiting for the luncheon invite. Brilwant also thought, and the cherry tart. Leah closed her eyes and smiled, sure, Mr. Brilwant. She went and thought, did something happen to her father? Brilwant glared at Roxanne and said to him, oh, that was when you were away. Noah thought, soon after our father's funeral, the head of the Hildebrandt family also passed away from an illness. They held a small funeral for him since the siblings were away, Brilwant said, and currently Miss Leah is acting as the head of the family. Roxanne thought, that makes sense. I wondered what made her come to the party. Leah said, right? She hadn't been attending many official events. Leah said to him, there hadn't been many opportunities for us to meet. Is it your first time meeting Miss Leah? She attended our father's funeral. Well, we were both busy. Roxanne said to her, I don't recall. Brilwant pointed at him and said, bring him some of that tea that helps soothe headaches. He replied, sure, Mr. Brilwant. She thought, isn't that Vivian Stegen? He replied, yes. Why is Noah acting like a brother to Miss Leah, by the way? Not sure. She's always been like that. Brilwant said. Max replied and said yes. Anyways, what is Noah doing? I mean, you and Brilwant asked, can you start cleaning up? Max replied yes. He thought, it's hard to say, I'm not really sure either, she thought, father. Mother. Leah, are you still mad at me? Mother thought and said, the third son who is missing. The second daughter who likes to party. Leah thought, the eldest daughter who is still not married. She thought, the Hildebrandt family is very dysfunctional. I will tell you as soon as we get home, so stay quiet for now, Noah. Okay, Noah and Leah in front of the grave. All the servants and Leah thought, right. Noah weeping and said, my siblings are not the kind of people to ignore. Leah said to him, Noah. A message about our father's death. Noah hugged her and said, Leah, I'm sorry. I really didn't know, Leah politely said, I know. I also apologize for yelling at you first. She thought, wah, father, I just got upset for some reason, to his face. Brilwant, Roxanne, and Noah thought, I wanted to show him that my siblings are also nice, kind, and great kids. Just like his siblings. Helena said, Miss Noah. Leah thought while she hugged her, Our family isn't that bad, convincing herself. Leah became sad and thought. Leah also thought, who cares anyways? Roxanne Cromer probably doesn't care. Noah shouted and thought, what did you say? Rihit ran away? She grabbed her hand and said, where did he go? I don't know. I said he ran away. When? About a month before our father's passing. I will find him. This boy. It's not like able to. Leah said while reading a letter, as you can see from the note, I believe we haven't been considerate of his feelings. She shouted and thought, I did find out that he finally joined the army after many attempts. The army? Where? Imperial or House Army? Leah thought, no idea. I haven't heard back from the informants since then. Noah thought, I never thought about how you might not have received my letter. I think there must be some type of problem with the letter sending system. Noah said, I will write to the knights who are still stationed in Poland. I'm sure Rihit stands out. He's quite small to be in the military. Servants thought, the border area isn't very stable these days because of the plague. That's probably why the messages didn't get to me. Right, I should also write to Hound Cromer, who is also in Poland. Leah said, I understand you, Noah, but you can't let everyone know about this. Other people can't know that we don't know Rihit's whereabouts. Noah thought, because Mr. Rihit has to return safe and take his place as head of the family. Noah turned and glanced. Oh, right, Noah, Leah, and servants were together. Noah became very angry and said, but our cutie, our angel. What if something happened to him? What if that's why he couldn't write a letter? What if he is sick? We need to find him as soon as possible. Leah said, you are talking like me a few months ago. She thought, don't worry. Angels don't die. That's true. She also said, we still need to find him soon. Noah replied, yes, yes. Noah glanced and thought, anyways, I will ask a couple of knights in Poland who I can trust. I'm sure they know many people since they've participated in various battles. Leah looked and said, okay. As long as it doesn't trouble the Cromers. Noah sat in front of her and said, Why? I'm sure they will gladly help our family, both Roxant and Browant, and Hound in Poland. Leah loudly said, you've been troubling them for a while. You forced your way into the knighthood because you had a crush on Hound Cromer. And also, what happened today? Noah replied, that's true. But, Leah started beating her and said, that's what happens at parties. Miss Leah, she could die. Leah said, you can date and fall in love with anyone regardless of their gender. Noah thought, but shouldn't you try to maintain some stability? You are not that young anymore. Noah replied, you're right, but, Noah said, I was always serious about all those relationships. I even got rejected by Mr. Hound. I've had a crush on him for years. Leah replied, perhaps, it might be quicker for you to get married than for me to get married or to find Rihit. Noah asked, marry? Servants said, yes, Miss Noah. Servants said, if you get married, you can be the head of the family instead of Mr. Rihit. Noah turned and glanced. Even though Miss Leah is currently acting as the head of the family, people are going to talk soon. They are going to ask for the official head of the Hildebrand family. Oh, Leah thought, you probably haven't thought about it because Miss Leah and Mr. Rihit have been there, but it's time for you to seriously think about it. Leah said, so you've always been seriously in love, but you've never thought about getting married, and about the position of head of the family? Leah hit her, and she shouted and thought, how is that serious? Leah picked her from the neck and servants said, well, Miss Noah has always dated other women though, and got rejected by Mr. Hound. Leah thought, marrying another woman doesn't have any legal weight. Servants said, there's, actually, one guy. There is? Really? Who? Noah said, but that's a little. Noah thought, as you saw earlier, the situation is, she said, saw earlier? What did I see? Mr. Rihit taking a cup of tea and thought, Schultz. Rihit turned and said, Mr. Brillwant? He said, is that the tea for my brother? Leah said, yes. Rihit said, why are you bringing that? I told my servants to, I was on the way to ask about tomorrow's agenda anyways. Brillwant said, it's not like I'm that different from the servants either. Brillwant smiled and said, you are lowering yourself too much. You are a Muller, And you are also my brother's assistant now. Noah said, I don't have much to do as an assistant. Mr. Roxon takes care of everything by himself. Leah said, I will give you a bunch of work then. Rihid asked, Please don't, what's wrong? Leah said, Schultz, haven't you been dating Noah ever since you guys came back from Poland? But what was that earlier? Rihid said, I knew it. Schultz Muller asked, I mean, the situation has kind of changed. She thought, Schultz Muller? As Brilwant arrived in the office, she looked him and said, Roxant. Brilwant said him, How's your headache? It's a long one today. Brilwant also said him that perhaps it's because you were in a crowded place. Brilwant turned and said him, Schultz asked about tomorrow's plan, so I just told him to come by tomorrow morning. All we have to do tomorrow is check documents, right? Roxanne replied, Right. Brilwant asked, Are the teas helping at all? Roxanne said him, While he was having a cup of tea, of course. Especially when they are from you. Brilwant smiled and said, Roxanne, Miss Leah has invited us to a luncheon, so I told her that I'd go with you. Brilwant thought, even though I haven't received an official invitation yet. Brilwant became very happy and said, Wow, I thought you would spit it out. You are so calm. Roxanne said, Brilwant happily said she said they make good cherry tarts. Roxanne shouted and said, What are you planning? Huh, what do you mean? Roxanne stood up and said him, There's always a reason behind that smile of yours. Brilwant said him, What's wrong with my smile? Roxanne said him, I can see the word tricks written all over your mouth. I'm not going. Brilwant shouted, replied PSH, Roxanne. Roxanne said that, Who are you trying to trick? You only smile like that when you have a favor to ask or you are planning something. Roxanne also said that, Stop pouting. Roxanne said him that I've told you countless times. I don't want to attend an event like that. Brilwant smiled and said, An event? It's just a casual invitation. He replied, I still can see the word, Brilwant said. Brilwant picked him and said, You also mentioned how we need to maintain an amicable relationship with the Hildebrands. Since you are still helping me out with my duties as the head of the family, please go with me just this once. Brilwant, surprised, said, Not to mention, people are going to talk because we are both still single. Brilwant said him that you saw how people acted at the party earlier. All we did was have a conversation and they were already whispering. Roxanne said that of course people will gossip about good-looking people. You were supposed to be engaged by now, even if it was for show. Brilwant looked him and said, If you keep talking, Brilwant said that, I will get mad. You know very well who has my heart. Roxanne thought the infamous Roxanne Cromer of the legendary Cromer family has a critical weakness. He has a soft spot for his younger brother, Brilwant. Roxanne said him, I went too far. Forgive me. Brilwant smiled and looked and said, It's fine. Roxanne said him, I will go just this once. Not more than that. Brilwant became happy and said, Thank you. Roxanne thought, so it always ends up going Brilwant's way. Brilwant said, By the way, do you guys really not know each other? He asked. Who? Brilwant also said, Stop acting like you don't know. I'm talking about Miss Leah. Yes, we don't. Lies. Brilwant said that Miss Leah seemed like she was constantly concerned about you. It seemed like you were about her too. Roxanne said that even if I didn't know her, it's not like we can go back. Servant shouted and said, Schultz Muller? Since when? Noah said, Why yes. Noah said that we went to Poland together, as knights for Mr. Hound. And then, seriously interested. Why are they so excited? Servant Helena said, He told me, he loved me, he told you he loved you. That Mr. Schultz Muller? To you, Miss Noah? Yes, right. Servant queried between them and said, I want to tell people. No. No way. No. Why are they so crazy about it? That Mr. Schultz. Noah thought Mr. Schultz doesn't consider himself to be a royal, since his mother is from a slum. So, he doesn't attend many royal social events. But he is very famous among the non-nobles. Noah said, Oh. Noah said that now I think about it, I think that was true in Poland as well. The maids of Mr. Hound followed him around. Let's tell people. He was popular. Leah said that. So what is he famous for? I only saw him briefly. I was also very upset. His looks? Intelligence? Noah looked at the servants and said, Hey, Mr. Rihid thought he is tall and good-looking, and has a well-rounded personality. Noah said, does he? So, they both thought. For being a player. Noah and Leah thought that he doesn't reject anyone nor stop anyone from leaving. One time, 2 women fought over him. I also heard that one guy who lost his lover to him asked to fight. So he won with his outstanding sword-wielding skills and also broke up with that girl. And of course, he cheats. I also heard that tens of women cried when he left to go to Poland. It sounds like, Noah thought that, and you are famous among the royals. Me? Servant said, I know, right. Helena shouted and said, the 2 infamous players of the century are dating. This is crazy. I'm going to tell everyone. Leah thought that people are gonna gossip over them doing something as normal as walking together anyways. So many women are going to pass out over this. Leah looked and thought, with this kind of reaction, you are gonna have a hard time. Noah thought, even if you guys get married by some tiny chance. I also didn't expect this. Noah thought, was he that popular? Leah said that, but are you guys really dating? It seemed like he knew what you were doing in that room. Noah thought, he doesn't get jealous or angry. Noah said her, there's a reason behind that. Oh, by the way, Miss Leah. Leah asked a reason. Helena shouted and said, what happened with Mr. Brilwant? Leah thought, when Helena and Leah were fighting, Helena, people might think that you are the main character at this rate. I invited him over, even though he said he will come with his brother, Roxant. You invited him? Yes, I talked about Helena's amazing cherry tarts. Even though he will come with Roxant. Ah. What do we do? Helena shouted and thought that I need to buy the best high-quality cherries. Noah said, Mr. Brilwant said he'll come? Leah said yes. With Roxant. Leah said that I think Helena wants me to date Mr. Brilwant. Huh. Noah said, but he has a lover. Leah glanced and said, I knew it. Ho's servants thought I knew it. It almost felt like he wanted something else from me. Well, I just acted like I didn't know and was nice. I have a mission, to make an outstanding cherry tart. That's good. But how did you know that Mr. Brilwant has a lover and that he wants something from you? Leah Strange said, well, he had the same business smile on his face that I have. Similar people can tell. Leah also said that should I set up a meeting with Schultz Muller first? I want to talk to him directly instead of hearing about it through the rumor mill. Leah smiled and said, because Noah, you are also so different from what the rumors say about you. Noah thought, Mr. Schultz is now Mr. Roxant's assistant. It'd be faster for you to go in person to the Kromers to see him. Shuzzle holding the books in hands and said, I'm sorry, Miss Leah. I have some documents to quickly take care of today. Can you wait a bit? Miss Leah opened the door and asked, would you prefer to meet at some other time? Shuzzle replied, no, you came all the way here. If you can just wait for about an hour. Shuzzle looked at her and said, today, I was not supposed to be busy. I know why you are here, and I also have something to tell you. Someone said Schultz. Shuzzle replied, yes. I'm coming. Brinwant smiled and said, he seems hard-working. It's all right, I live right nearby. How about tomorrow? Shuzzle said him, but I feel so bad. Brinwant shouted and said, Schultz. Roxant is looking for the Poland agreement. Brinwant looked surprised and said, Miss Leah? Miss Leah smiled and said, hello, Mr. Brilwant. I was just talking to Schultz since you seemed very busy. Brinwant also said her when they gather, what are you talking about? How could you come to my house and leave without seeing me? Miss Leah laughed, haha. Miss Leah also said while she was smiling, forgive me, I didn't let you know before coming, you also seem busy. Brinwant looked at her and said, don't worry. I was about to take a break anyways. Come on in. On the other hand, Shuzzle became angry because he was holding the books. She said, it's fine. Brinwant shouted and said her love breaks. Roxant. Miss Leah is here. Let's take a break. She smiled and thought, I don't want to see your brother's face. Roxant read a letter. Brinwant smiled and asked from her she'd like to talk to Schultz. Can Schultz take a break too? Roxant glanced and said, as long as he finds the Poland agreement from the pile of documents and finishes the Prussian translation of the document. Shuzzle arrived and said him all the documents got mixed up on the way here from Poland. Brinwant said, come in. It will be done quick. Shuzzle said that it'll take a long time, Mr. Brilwant. Roxant glared at him and asked how about we plan for another time if it's not urgent. Miss Leah said that's what I was going to. Brinwant laughed, and said made her come in. Brinwant also said when Roxanne read the letter one by one we only have the agreement to submit by today. Shuzzle thought what's with this tension? Shuzzle became sad and said actually, I can only speak basic Prussian. I can't translate official documents that use difficult sentences. Miss Leah asked him would you like me to help? Brinwant said her you speak Prussian? Miss Leah said that a little. I went to Poland when I was part of the Imperial Knights. If you're okay with me looking at the document then I can help. That way, I will be able to talk to Schultz faster. Roxanne gave her a letter and said please. Leah said oh, sure. She thought what? Leah took a letter and while she took it, she thought he knows how to ask for a favor like a normal person. Miss Leah read a letter and thought, with a frown on his face, but still. Brinwant stood with Shuzzle and smiled. Roxanne was sitting on the chair. Miss Leah came and placed a letter on the table in front of him, and he looked. Miss Leah looked at him and thought, his eyes are purple. Did he lose his sight in his left eye? Roxanne also looked towards her. Miss Leah thought eek, I was staring for too long. Caught me, she looked and said that's basically everything that this paper says. Roxanne looked at her and said thank you. Brinwant became happy and said her Miss Leah, this way. Come have some tea. She replied oh yes. She thought is it okay for me to talk here? Shuzzle thought everyone knows about Noah, no, Miss Noah. Shuzzle sat on the sofa and said yes, it's true that I confessed my love to her in Poland. Miss Leah shouted and asked so what? What I saw yesterday didn't look like you guys are in a relationship. She also asked him that. You also knew about what Noah was doing last night, didn't you? Yes. So how are you guys actually dating? Brinwant and Roxanne together while Brinwant held the papers and turned and thought we made a promise in Poland, before our return, to fully commit to each other. If we are going to do this, she asked fully? Brinwant replied yes. Miss Leah sat on the sofa and said him that means, you guys are in the process of doing that, Mr. Schultz. Shuzzle said her please just call me Schultz. Miss Leah said it looks like it's Noah who isn't keeping up her end of the agreement. Shuzzle sadly said her it seems like Noah, no, Miss Noah, has too soft a heart to reject people. Miss Leah held her forehead and said him no, you should just call her Noah. Shuzzle said her, we speak casually to each other only when we are alone. Shuzzle looked at her and said I'm trying to be careful in public. I keep forgetting about our difference in status because we are comrades. Miss Leah said him what do you mean difference in status? Just date you two. Shuzzle said her I heard about the Heidbrandts situation. So actually, Leah thought I'm thinking about ending things with Miss Noah before it gets more serious. She said what? Shuzzle looked at the biscuits and a cup of tea and said her as you know, I have a different mother in the Muller family. I'm the last to get inheritance. Shuzzle also said her that I'm not the right fit for her husband, with just a few small achievements to my name. Shuzzle said 6 families are going to absolutely disapprove when my name gets mentioned. Brilwant shouted and said not me. I approve. Then fine families. Shuzzle said her when she looked him even if we end up getting married, people are going to doubt her qualification as the head of the family. Shuzzle said her I don't want to make Miss Noah and her family unhappy just because of love. Leah thought that Miss Noah probably only considered me to be boyfriend material, and didn't think about that serious stuff. She thought that he knows Noah too well. Shuzzle smiled and said I also didn't expect this as well. If I had known that this was going to happen, I would have been more cautious. Miss Leah said that I want to ask you one question, Schultz. Shuzzle thought you truly like Noah, right? Leah said him that answer me, without taking marriage status and other people's opinions into account. Shuzzle said yes. Shuzzle said her I've loved her for a very long time, since the first time I met her. Shuzzle said her that believe it or not, I haven't thought about anyone else, ever since that day. Leah thought however, if I only consider my feelings without thinking about the things you listed, Shuzzle said her, that'd be selfishness, not love. Brilwant and Roxanne looked them. Shuzzle said her that if I bury and give up on my feelings, everyone can be happy. She thought, he is, she shouted and thought, a much better person than I expected. How did he fall in love with that girl? Shuzzle shocked and looked her and thought falling in love with someone at first sight is no common occurrence, Schultz. You might not even experience it at all. Shuzzle said her yes, I know that too. Leah smiled and said him I bet you do. You met her. Leah Hildebrand asked that then, how can you say that you're willing to give up so easily? Shuzzle looked on her and said don't worry about the Hildebrand's situation regarding who will become the next head of family. I, who happen to be the head at the moment, will take care of it. Leah said him in front of all. I always hope that my younger siblings will be free and happy. Leah smiled and also said, even when it comes to love. Leah looked at Brilwant and said I'm going to leave now. I'm sorry for last night and today, Mr. Brilwant. Brilwant said her you can stay longer. Shuzzle said Miss Leah. Leah looked him and said him Schultz, don't be discouraged. Take care of Noah. Leah said I'm just sorry that you have to deal with her. I'm just sorry that you have to deal with her. Come visit us often. Shuzzle started weeping and said I appreciate that. You must have had a hard time. He thought she needs to clean up her other relationships first. Leah entered the room and thought I acted confident, but Shuzzle said her I will pay you a visit soon. Take care. Leah shouted and asked him do I really have to get married? Is that the only way? Leah smiled and said you're welcome anytime. She thought that didn't they have a son? Why is she stressing over who will be the head of the family? Shuzzle and Brilwant looked surprised and said oh, Roxanne thought that it seems like he's been away for a long time. I don't know the details. People also talked about how he didn't attend his own father's funeral. Brilwant said him regardless, he is still very young. So if Miss Leah or Miss Noah doesn't get married, Sir Conrad, their uncle, most likely will take over as head of the family. Roxanne asked him that regardless of her gender, shouldn't she be able to take over as head of the family given how much she's contributed to the country? Brilwant said him in reply the Hildebrands have contributed immensely, but we can't create a special law just for her. Brilwant said that he's frustrated. Shuzzle thought aren't they similar, Miss Leah and Mr. Roxant? Brilwant looked while Shuzzle asked oh, I guess they are. Perhaps because they were both the first child in their families. Brilwant said him they are both stubborn about taking care of their families all on their own. Shuzzle also said that, and they both have siblings that are out of control. Brilwant said him when he thought what are you talking about? I'm not out of control. Do you really not think so? Shuzzle asked him I can sense that you are planning on something involving Miss Leah and Mr. Roxant. Brilwant looked and said that doesn't mean I'm out of control. Brilwant also smiled and said they definitely know each other, smiley face. My brother is being shy, smiley face. Shuzzle looked him and said, anyways, things will probably end up the way you want, Mr. Brilwant. He also looked him and asked that's a compliment, right? Leah became happy and thought falling in love with someone at first sight is no common occurrence. Conrad Hildebrand thought that how are things going in your family regarding the position of head of family? Conrad Hildebrand said My family? Leah is doing well. Conrad Hildebrand, Leah's uncle. Sebastian Stegen said are you just gonna leave it like that? Sebastian Stegen, leader of the Stegen family. Conrad asked him why not. Sebastian said him that she's been the head for more than half a year. Conrad also said him that what's wrong with that? Roxanne Cromer has done the same thing for more than 10 years. Even though Brilwant eventually became the head of their family, Sebastian said him when they were having breakfast that's because the Cromers' leader had been sick. Conrad also said him that we are not that different. My brother suddenly passed away when people thought he was getting better. Conrad looked him with strange eyes and said Leah has held the role because Wright is still very young. Be patient and wait just 2 or 3 more years. Sebastian Stegen shouted and said he didn't even show up at his father's funeral. Conrad Hildebrand looked him and said are you sure he is traveling? Well, I'm sure there must have been some mistake. Even Noah hadn't heard about it while she was in Poland. Sebastian looked aggressive and said that's the problem with your family. The women are too strong, they suck out all of the energy the men have. Conrad smiled and said him we are a family established by women. Sebastian Stegen became very angry and said women shouldn't participate in important family business matters. Conrad said him you should have let Leah get married earlier. Do you think that is easy to do? My brother wasn't able to do it either. He thought She was very cold when she was at the peak of her career. No one could talk to her except her family. Even the senior knights were astounded by her during wars. She became much softer after my sister-in-law passed away. Conrad said him, I'm sure if she had the personality she has now at that time, there would have been a line of men who wanted to marry her. She's old and very tall right now, so, Sebastian glanced and asked him, how about your son, Thomas? Conrad said him, my son? Thomas? With Leah? Conrad also takes a piece of biscuit and said, no way. Even though cousins can get married, he doesn't even compare to Leah. Sebastian Stegen shouted and asked, are you looking down on your own son? He replied, it's true. Conrad said, my kid only thinks about food. Leah would yell at him so much. He thought, wouldn't that be a problem too? Sebastian Stegen said that, think about what happens after we die. At this rate, my children and your son will live how the two Kromer brothers and Leah say. Conrad thought, what if they get their property or rights taken away? They are not those kind of kids. Especially not our Leah. Sebastian Stegen said him, you have no idea. The two Kromer brothers already have so much power. Sebastian Stegen also said him that Hildebrandt's family comes after the Kromer family in terms of power. You need to do something about it. Wasn't that your family? Conrad thought you should appropriately divide up the property and rights to balance out power within the family. Conrad said that currently, you have the most property and rights of all the Hildebrandts. Sebastian Stegen also said, and it's not like your brother gave you some while he was wealthy. Wealthy and powerful people want more. Conrad looked shocked and said, well, that's because my brother passed away so suddenly, so we didn't have time. Conrad also said, I will bring it up with Leah. But seriously, Leah is not that kind of a person. Sebastian Stegen said, that's such a weak guy. It seems like he doesn't want anything. Sebastian Stegen shouted and said, Vivian, where are you going again? Vivian looked and said, Father, you're home already? Sebastian Stegen shouted on his daughter, aren't you ashamed of yourself? What will the Hildebrandts think of you? Vivian said him, but Miss Noah said she wants to talk to me. Sebastian Stegen said her, didn't I tell you to stop hanging out with Noah? You should be thinking about marriage at your age. Vivian surprised and said, but this is the first time she asked to meet up first. Vivian said his father, and it's been a long time. When she left to go to Poland I was so… Sebastian turned and shouted on him, I should worry about my family, not others. When's Lucas arriving? Oh, right. The Lord is arriving within 2 weeks. Sebastian said that, hurry, Lucas, this is your once-in-a-lifetime chance. Leah said, how's Uncle doing? Conrad taking the piece of cake and said happily, he's good as always. Conrad also said that if I had known that there would be so many of Helena's cherry tarts, I would have come over sooner. Dad also loves Emmy. Thomas Hildebrandt, Leah's cousin and Conrad's son. Leah looked his uncle and said, those are test tarts, so have as many as you want. Conrad laughed and asked, really? Yay. Leah thought, but why test tarts? Bro Wand is coming over. Uncle Conrad said. He thought that this one has a watery filling and the earlier one had a hard crust, and the other one's cherries were. Leah thought, when Servant Helena arrived I thought he would start talking about Wright's whereabouts and the position of head of family. Is he okay with it still? She said, her Helena. Did we get any other letters? Helena replied no. Leah sided on the sofa and thought, I'm past marriage age and I don't get asked on blind dates anymore since I've been rejecting them for years. Should I get involved in social events again? Leah still thought that just thinking about those women who like to gossip is already frustrating. I didn't have a choice though. It's not like I didn't want to get married, just wasn't desperate either. I want to go to the lake and rest. The people who I've met before were either too old, weak and thin, or rude to women. She became some sad and thought that still, I don't want a man who I feel like I have to protect. Noah smiled and thought if I had to, that kid at the lake would be a different story. Leah held a pillow and looked the rabbit. She thought, Olive, how long have you been here? Wait, is this because of Noah? I can't marry a girl. Helena whispered and said, is there something wrong with her? Leah thought, though she wasn't planning on it. She's been thinking about marriage recently. Right, I want my spouse to be someone I can depend on, and taller than me. Someone who is not cocky about their family, and who is responsible and always working on themselves, and who isn't rude. Leah shouted and said, "Ah. Not him. No. I must be crazy." Noah and all others said that. Leah. What's wrong? Scary. Noah catch him and thought Fat Thomas. Is that you? Leah shouted and thought he only coincidentally fit the criteria that I was listing. Relax. Relax, Leah. It was strictly coincidental because there aren't any decent guys around. That Roxanne Cromer. Roxanne thought shoutly, please. Right, he was rude. He's always so cold and unhappy looking. Always with an angry face. Thank you? They all shouted and thought that's not true. It's me who has been rude this whole time. Leah, calm down. Miss, Noah said him, have you calmed down a little, Leah? Servant get her ready and thought, why did you do that? Because of stress. Noah said it's about marriage, isn't it? Leah said no. Noah said that I wrote a letter to Poland asking for help. They replied saying that they will look for Rihit, but there was nothing after that. Leah also said you don't have to worry about me, Noah. But that's not why I am stressed. Leah said her that I was kind of shocked that he wasn't angry at me despite the many mistakes I've made. Noah asked from her mistakes you've made? With whom? Leah replied her yes. Roxanne thought that I just realized that he has never once. How does that make sense? Leah thought that, raised his voice. While staring at me, even with such a scary look on his face. How bad was my image of him? Stop thinking about Chai. Leah, you should feel ashamed. Is it the stress? I knew it. Rihit ran away. Lucas said her head that punk. Vivane pushed him and closed his face while Leah shouted on them. Vivane turned and looked her while she shut his mouth and shouted on her and said, Thomas. You should lock him up. Lock me up? Leah thought I was distracted by his innocence. Vivane said him that Thomas, I will lock you up if you tell anyone else. Repeat after me, Rihit is traveling. Duav. Servant Helena became very angry and said her I will no longer make desserts for you. Lucas said her shouted no. My tarts. On the other hand, Leah looked them and thought that's worse than being locked up. Leah closed her eyes and sat on the sofa and said, everyone is going to find out eventually. I can't hide it anymore. Lucas started weeping and said her while Vivane gave him a piece of cake in the plate, but you are hoping that they find out later. I won't tell anyone, even my father. Sorry. Eat more. Leah also said that yes, thank you. Rihit is going to come back eventually. Lucas looked her with tears eyes and said her, oh, that's why you are trying to marry someone. For the position of head of the family? But you don't even have any men to marry. Vivane angrily said him while Leah laughed. Sometimes you speak the brutal truth. Leah looked them and thought she hasn't changed at all. Just eat. Noah shocked and thought if you don't tell anyone, I will also give you polished snacks. Leah glanced and thought when I look at her face, I can't imagine her being Noah Hildebrandt, the player. Leah feel relaxed and still thought trespassing on private property, seeing his naked body, yelling and pointing, visiting the house without an invitation, and even staring at his face. I should seriously apologize to him at some point. She also thought that if he just didn't have that scar, he would have been quite too bad. And if he didn't frown. When Lucas, Vivane and Servant Helena looked her, she shouted on them and said, look at me, I am thinking about Roxanne Cromer again. She is way too stressed. Silent scream. Roxanne turned and glared them while Browan asked him, what's wrong, Roxanne? Roxanne said in glance, I feel like someone is talking badly about me. I can feel it. Browan take a paper and laughed, and said him, and you say you're not superstitious. Max said him, Mr. Browant, here are all the documents that you asked for. Browant looked him and said thanks. Max. Roxanne asked, when are you going? Browant read paper and surprised said, huh? He thought you said that you were invited to the Hildebrandts. Roxanne and Browant were sit on the sofa and Max was stand behind him, while Roxanne read a paper. Browant asked him, Roxanne, there really is something, isn't there? Roxanne said, what? He asked, what is there? Roxanne asked, what's there is, what, Browant? Browant became angry, and said him very closely, you can't lie to me. Just like how I can't hide anything from you. You are too close. Max looked them and thought, what is it really? You never ask about invitations to anything. There's something going on with you and Miss Leah, isn't there? Not at all. You told me to go with you, Brill once said him. I am not lying about anything. You have the lie face. Don't change the topic. What are you talking about? Come down from the table. Max said he probably. Max also said that he wants to see her again. And she's beautiful. Brill won't catch him from his coat and turn and replied the Max, that's obvious. Roxanne said him no. Brill won't said him, Lukey, you just lied. I told you to come down. Brill won't shocked and said, say something. I get that you are interested in Miss Leah. Brill won't said him, I can help only if you tell me. Roxanne replied, I never said that I'm interested in her. He said him, you're lying again. Max looked them and thought, I'm gonna go now. When Max was gone, Brill won't turned and looked him and said, Max, adjust the schedule to reflect that we assert the Hildebrands' invitation. Sure. Roxanne looked him and asked, what? So there wasn't even a set date. Brill won't said him, tell me now that Max is gone. Brill won't also said that you don't just get interested in someone for their beauty alone. Perhaps that's because you are listed to seeing my face. He said him, of course, Miss Leah is also very smart. Roxanne said Dot, but it's not like that. Roxanne stand up and thought, while he gone at the party, you kept looking for her every time you heard her voice. He also thought about her when she smiled, or when she was just talking. You looked, Brill once said, almost emotional. Brill once said him, I will help you. Be brave. Roxanne said, I told you, it's not like that. Brill once shouted and said, Roxanne. He thought, it's just, Roxanne said him, I want to pay her back for something. Brill won't look strange and asked him, pay her back? Roxanne looked him and said, right. It's about something that she doesn't remember at all, so stop being too excited, Brill won't. Brill won't sadly thought, don't even think about doing something weird. Or I'll be mad. Brill won't thought that he really does get mad when he says that he will. Brill won't said, so what are you paying her back for? Please stop. Persistent Brill won't also said that very strange eyes, what is going on this late at night? Brill won't looked her and said, Miss Leah? Brill won't said her, I'm so sorry to come here again like this, Mr. Brill won't. Leah said him, but there's something I must know. Roxanne thought I received a letter saying that my brother, Rihit, had previously joined Sir Roxanne's army. Roxanne read a letter and shouted and thought, I know this is an unreasonable request, Sir Roxanne. But please check this once. I just want to know if Rihit, my brother, returned to Germany when you did. Leah looked them and said, at the very least, I want to know what he is doing. Brill won't looked her strange and said her, Miss Leah, Roxanne will find that out for you. Roxanne glanced him and said, Brill. Leah said him, oh. Roxanne said him, go and ask Schultz and Max to bring all of the documents that contain the names of all of the soldiers. Brill won't looked him and said, ah. Okay, Roxanne. Leah thought, that is this information. Roxanne read a letter and said, about his joining of my army credible? Do you know why he would do that? Leah asked. Perhaps. Leah became angry and said because he wanted the chance to show his skills, where his privilege didn't play any kind of role. Noah is already a part of the knightage, so I'm sure that he intentionally joined your army, which is known to be the strongest and most dangerous one. Roxanne said her, Miss Leah Hildebrand. Roxanne said her, I understand that you are worried about your younger brother, but please remain calm and listen to me first. Leah looked him and thought, if he tried to join as a general soldier, that means that he kept his identity hidden from the start. Roxanne also glanced and said, looking for him at this point is basically like looking for a needle in a haystack. It's difficult for me to manage general soldiers, don't you think? Leah thought, supposing that your brother, Rihit, did join my army, that would have been around the time I was participating in multiple large-scale battles. Roxanne said her, some names might be missing or in the wrong order, since we would constantly accept more and more soldiers. So there are going to be many injured and dead people on the list as well. He also said her, I'm not saying that I won't help. I'm just saying that you should be prepared to hear bad news. Leah replied him, I've also been in wars before. Leah also said him that don't worry about that, Sir Roxanne. Roxanne glared and said, Brill? Brill once said him, I'm bringing them right now. Roxanne said him that you look like you won't be able to sleep after this. Would you like to look through the documents together? Leah shocked and said, I would really appreciate that. Roxanne said him and gave a papers. I only suggested doing that because it would be efficient. I'm sure some of the documents were written in Prussian. Shuzzle said him Mr. Roxanne. I brought everything I could find. Brilwant said her Miss Leah, come sit over here. When they all are gathered at the same place. Brilwant also said that Max, go and ask for some warm snacks since it's cold outside. Leah strange and said I knew it. Okay, Roxanne thought I'll go and look for some more. There's some paper left in Polandi. Not sure. But I'll send a letter. She thought, he's a nice person, even though he sounds cold. Brilwant gave her address and said Miss Leah. Use this blanket, since it's still chilly in the morning. Leah takes address and said thank you. Ho! Mr. Brilwant, she said in pajamas. Leah shouted and said I am in my pajamas. Came back to real life. I also showed up without asking. Again. Brilwant became so glad and said who cares? We are all in pajamaso. Leah shouted and said that's only because of me. Brilwant smiled and said I am so sorry. I'm sure you were flustered by the information. I understand. Leah said him, thank you so much for your kind words, Mr. Brilwant. Brilwant said her I said it's Finiv. Brilwant looked and said him right, Roxanne? Roxanne said her, yes, but try not to do it again. Leah thought and said ugh, I'm so rude. I can't control myself when it comes to my younger siblings. Okay, Brilwant thought first. Would you like a cup of tea, Roxanne? Roxanne gave her a ladder and asked her I think you should look over these documents. What do you think we should do? She replied sure. Leah said him he has a baby face so he looks like a teenager, no older. He's always had a fencing tutor so he knows how to use a sword, however, he's never learned how to shoot arrows or use spears so he's probably not in the cavalry. Roxanne said her the sword skills he learned from his family must still be far above those of the other commoners. Leah said him right, I'm sure he was in the back since he's small. Roxanne told her that a teenage soldier in the back, with blue eyes and a small body, and perhaps with dyed hair as well, is that about it? She said yes. Roxanne also said her I'll pick out some names regardless of their injury or death status. She replied, okay. Leah said him while taking the papers Sir Roxanne. Thank you so much for everything. Also, I apologize for unintentionally causing trouble every time. Roxanne asked from her can I ask you something? She said sure, anything. She thought what do you think about giving up your position as head of the family? Noah said her I apologize for showing up so early in the morning. Is my sister here by any chance? Servant thought Noah. Noah looked him and said Schultz. Schultz said oh no Miss Noah. Miss Leah is here. Noah said him I'm sorry. I didn't have time to stop her. Schultz looked her and said this way. The both are gone. Noah said slowly I thought we weren't gonna speak formally when it's just us two. Schultz asked her but it's not just the two of us. He thought oh yeah? Noah angry and said observants are ever aware. Leah told me that you said that you wouldn't marry me. Schultz said her I don't know if you heard Miss Leah right, but I guess that's true. Noah became happy and said wow. Schultz rejected me. Schultz asked her I mean, it's not like you've ever thought about marrying me anyways, right? Noah asked I did. I seriously thought about it. What makes you think that I didn't? Schultz looked at her and said clean up your relationships first. Noah said I am. It just takes me longer than you. Schultz said her, and why is it taking you so long? Because you aren't rejecting them right off the bat. Noah shouted and said no. I am. Schultz said her stop being so stubborn. You never wanted to marry me. You just don't like the fact that I rejected you first. Noah said facts. Noah also shouted and said what's the problem? We can date after getting married. I am going to be yours just as you wanted. Noah looked strange and said not to mention, you wouldn't have to worry about being the illegitimate child. It's like a status upgrade. You are going to become the head of the Hildebrandt family. Schultz shouted and said if that is truly what you think of me, then we shouldn't do this. Noah also shouted and said what?